Today's topic is truth in memoir. This comes by request, so thank you for that. It's a great topic. I guess where I want to start is by drawing a pretty easy line to think about in terms of it being a guiding post, which is that truth is subjective, but untruth is not. And I think that's a great place to start from. There's so many things when you're working on your memoir that are going to be messed up, lots of things that are going to be misremembered. But the question really lies in whether the events actually transpired or not, and then whether you or other people's reactions could have happened or would have happened a certain way, which is emotional truth. So we'll get into that a little bit more. Things that are allowed in memoir and actually are kind of expected at this point are things like stretching or moving timelines. You're allowed to compress time. You're allowed to say that something happened, maybe a month or two or even a year off if it serves the story in a certain way, and as long as it is not categorically untrue. You're also allowed to composite characters, and that one is kind of a hard, squishy one for some people, because you'll think to yourself, well, that's not who the character is. But the reason for that is because you're allowed to disguise people for their protection. And also, perhaps it just makes more sense because they're too many friends, for instance, in a given scene, and you're going to compress a few friends into one person. You can obviously change names and identifying characteristics of people, and sometimes you have to for legal reasons. If you're talking about someone who behaved badly and who might sue you, but in those cases, you really actually need to change people's identifying details. And then you can recreate dialogue. We always say in our 6-month class that you did not walk around with a tape recorder strapped to your hip for your entire life. And so therefore, you don't actually have the factual transcript of what happened. And so, of course, you can recreate dialogue, and that is also expected. Now, what happened in books that got, a lot of scandal attached to them, big uproars, like A Million Little Pieces and James Fry? Well, he made things up. A lot of the stories that are in that book simply did not happen. And that is the difference that we're talking about here, right? Did it happen or did it not happen? And within the category of did it happen, are you allowed to have interpretation and other kinds of remembrances that may be different from other people's? Absolutely. Another example of a scandal was Greg Mortensen's 3 Cups of Tea. In that book as well, he talked about creating a school in Afghanistan and Pakistan that simply did not happen. And he was sued, and he had to pay them $1 million for using their school in his book. And he was not actually helping that school. And that is, that's unethical, beyond other things. But it's like people get really uptight and scared about truth in memoir. But some of the worst examples of things that have happened have been quite egregious. Now, I want to highly recommend that all of you read this book, okay, The Art of Memoir, because Mary Carr is amazing for so many reasons. I'm a huge fan, but there are some particular gems about the truth. And there's a chapter in this book called The Truth Contract Twixt Writer and Reader. And this is Mary Carr's take on truth and memoir. And while even Mary Carr can't draw a perfect bright line in the sand around the rules of truth and fiction, she does make a very strong case, again, for not lying, for not telling untruths, and then also for why interpretation, recreating, and playing with time do not fall into the category of untruths. There's a little section in here that is really worth reading that I'm going to, because she takes the writer Vivian Gornick to task, because Vivian Gornick says something to the effect of, oh, I make stuff up all the time in my nonfiction. Who cares? What do I owe the reader? And Mary Carr's reaction to that goes as follows. If I forked over a cover price for nonfiction, I do consider it my business. While it's great that Vivian Gornick owned up to her deceits, it's hard to lend credence to any after the fact confession, especially one as self-justifying as this one. It's as if after lunch, the deli guy quipped, "I just put a teaspoon of cat shit in your sandwich, but you didn't notice it at all." To my mind, a small bit of cat shit equals a cat shit sandwich, unless I know where the cat shit is and I can eat around it. So I love that, and that is like the kind of stuff that you'll hear from Mary throughout this book, and it's helpful, it's grounding. Uh, and in our classes, we talk about emotional truth being more important than the facts, ma'am, if you will. And if you have the facts, great, but many of us do not, or we've forgotten them, or what happened is open for interpretation. And that is what memoir is anyway, right? It's interpretation of our lived experience told through our subjective lens. So you must give yourself some permission around that. I think a really good analysis for whether something belongs is a simple litmus test, which is, did it happen? Yes or no? Okay, good. Then is how you're describing what happened, either what happened, what could have happened, or what would have happened, as opposed to the opposite, which is not happened. So this is emotional truth. And I want to give you a personal, for instance, stuff that I'm working on. So my dad came out when I was 5. I very much remember that. I remember the moment that my mom told me, "Your dad is gay." It was a huge early memory of mine. And I remember some of the feelings associated with that. But what I decidedly do not remember is my dad moving out of our house. I have zero memory of that. But I remember the feelings associated with him not being in the house anymore. And the fact that, yes, it happened, he moved out. There are a number of ways in which it could have played out, that it would have played out. And so when I'm working on that scene and talking about him moving out, I am using emotional truth. It's a fact that he moved out, and it's a fact that I understand these feelings that I would have slash could have had around that. And I am allowed to interpret that and put it into scene and not have to tell my reader, I don't remember how it felt. I don't remember how he left. It could have happened like this. That is going to get really boring really quickly with a whole lot of caveats and qualifications that your reader does not need because it happened and you can put your truth onto it. So that's an example of how to think about this. And those are the rules, squishy a little bit, but also I would say not that hard to abide by. So I hope it's helpful. Again, definitely read Mary's book. This is a memoir Bible for those of you who haven't read it, and happy writing today.